There's something in the face that starts the whole piece,
Okay.
And it's almost like a conversation begins, where all of a sudden I have some relationship to the character, and I suppose in a broad sweep, they're all me. One of the neat things that's happened in this body of work, which started a few years ago, is that the figure, because I worked with the figure forever, has been the center of my work, but the figure's never had a home before. And it's always kind of, I've never known where my figures exist. And there's something about putting this work to paper, I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden they'd found a home. And so the home appears to be in the landscape, which I guess if I look back on my life, it doesn't surprise me, but I could have told you that was coming. And I struggled with what to do with my figures and how to house them. And all of a sudden they seem to have found their housing. And so there's this relationship in all of them to some kind of natural landscape or element. And it's a very, I think of them, they're landscapes from memory, from a lot of my living on in various landscapes and traveling through it, and so there's that I think very numinous quality to the landscape, the wild landscape, and there's a very numinous quality to the figure, and so they kind of I try to work them in consort together, and they do have a narrative quality. And what's been the most interesting thing for me in this project, which has moved my work to having some stop motion animation, is to take one of these figures that usually is still, but put into motion. So all of a sudden it's pushing me deeper into my understanding of my work, or having to ask questions like, who are you and where are you going, and what are you in a relationship to, and how are you going to move, and what do you need to move, and so those are really good questions for me. And so the animation is challenging that way, to have a narrative. I mean, my stills, I call them stills, the ones that don't move, there's an implied narrative, and I want the viewer to bring their own narrative as much as, I don't want to be directive, but once they begin to move, it puts a lot of responsibility on me instead. It feels like now I have to sort of begin to bring a narrative to it more than I had. So that's been, I think, the most exciting part, and perhaps the biggest challenge, and a little bit more like of a coming out of in the piece that's playing in the gallery, Ritual. It's really coming out with a sort of a personal cosmology. So it's a little bit, feels bold. Feels bold for me to do that. It looks a lot at the animal body that we live in, and how that animal body, how we relate to that animal body, and how that animal body shapes us, or we shape it, or the relationship to really mortality and the animal body. So. It happened, I kind of made this change to paper. I got really stuck in my painting, and I kind of panicked a bit, and I thought, well, maybe I'm not going to paint again. And I really love painting, and but I could not finish a painting and be happy with it. So I jumped to clay, and I jumped to sculpture for a bit, and I kind of squirmed around and tried different things, and then one day I came in and I noticed that I have a lot of paper. And in fact, I might be a bit of a paper hoard, and I thought, just draw. And drawing was always the underlying base of my painting anyways, and so I thought, just draw. Just be simple. So I started to draw, and I started to kind of make composite drawings and put things together and overlap, and then some of these early paper panels started. I thought, well, what am I going to put? Well, I should put these on something, a backing, and then that figure ground relationship began to happen as well. So it all kind of happened quite organically, and then I walked in one day and I thought, they move. The big pieces move. And then in my mind, I imagine it's kind of the way they come together anyways on the wall. Is I move things around endlessly until something settles, and build something, and create and cut out something. And very much, I mean, my mantras, one of my mantras as I'm working is draw everything, everything drawn. It's a drawing. I see the process as a drawing base. And so even the importance of the line, even in my cutout shapes, I mean, that's really important to me. How that line is also, the cutout is also a line. It holds a shape, but it's the edge is the more important part. Because line, as you can see in my work, line is sort of leads the way in describing the form. This new direction of my work is the least color I've ever used. And that was a big shift too. All of a sudden I dropped, because I just had to work with the paper I had. And this work really began in the pandemic. And so I don't know why, I guess there was limitations and stuff, but I really have to work with what I can get locally in a lot of ways. And I feel there's some limitations on what I can find paper-wise. And so the palette's been very reduced. And so it's very monochromatic, or I almost think. And there's every now and then there's like a little splash of one. Maybe there's a little more color coming in now, but for the most part, they are very achromatic or monochromatic. But I think my real love of line came through, I did a year in Florence, Italy, studying when I was in my undergraduate at the Ontario College of Art. I just would go through the drawing cabinets. And and you can look at Michelangelo's and all the Renaissance artists, Pontormo, and you just see their beautiful use of line. So I think that was partly, instrumental in my use of line.
Where in Florence were you, or what was that?
I was in Florence in I think it was 84.
Was it like an atelier of some sort? Or?
Yeah, it was the off-campus program for the Ontario College of Art.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and there was only a handful of us went. It was an older program that had gotten less popular, because the other program was New York City. You could go, and that was much more popular. So there was like 8 of us or something who, the old dinosaurs who wanted to go over and look at the Renaissance. But it was so formative for me. It was so fantastic. So they're much more fragile than throwing a painting around, but that's part of it. And they're structural. They're a little bit sculptural, which a painting is a little bit too. But these are really sculptural. They're not 3D, although they have had some 3D components in some of the scenes. You're constructing and you're building, you're layering, and that part is a challenge to me, because I bring in that whole idea about craft, and is this good enough craft, and how much do I expose of the process? But the building part is hard to hide the process. So it's kind of trying to bring that in and welcome it as just that's what it is. It's more transparent than the painting might be for me. And yet, the animation, the final product of or the final video or animation, stop motion animation, is built on those layers, just like a painting would be built on layers. We still don't always see those layers, but there have been artists who have photographed every day and as they work on a painting, and essentially created like a stop motion animation of process of. So that's this is it kind of allows you to catch that as well. Yeah. I was reading a book called The Caliban and the Witch, and I've read a fair bit about the Spanish Inquisition, and that hat has a very ancient, older, and to me it takes it to that time period, which I'm not, wasn't intentional, I'm not sure, but I kind of feel like that. It's a very dark figure, and I don't know, there's something in the headdress that's really important. And I lived down in southern Utah for a bunch of years, and I was fortunate enough to work with archaeologists and go out in the canyons and look at those beautiful pictographs and petroglyphs, and I also worked as with an archaeologist to record and document some of those panels down in the San Juan Basket Maker and the Big Kachina panels and the Anasazi stuff, the really old stuff, and I was really fascinated with what was on their heads. Often the figures had elaborate head something was happening coming from their head, whether it was stacking or moving out, and often moving towards another figure or out into. So I think there's that, I call expressions of relatedness, of what I kind of think of those.